Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read S5 5081, The Last of the Mohicans, James the Fenimore Cooper. Part A. Chapter 1, The Indian Guide. When North America still belonged to both Great Britain and France, there was war between the two armies. The land between the head of the Hudson River and the nearby lakes saw some fierce fighting. Lake Champlain started in French Canada and ended in British land, where it was joined by Lake Hurricane. From Lake Hurricane was a journey of only a few miles overland to the Hudson River, and from there you could sail to the sea. So the French were interested in winning this land, and the British wanted to keep it. Important battles were fought here, and many forts were built here too. Our story begins in the third year of this war. One day in the middle of the summer, a fierce-looking Indian runner arrived at Fort Edward, the British fort at the south of the land route that went from Lake Hurricane to the Hudson River. He brought news that the French general, the Montcalm, was crossing Lake Champlain with a huge army. He also brought a message from a General Monro, the old Scottish officer commanding Fort William Henry, which stood on Lake Hurricane, asking for reinforcements to help him to fight against the Montcalm. General Webb, the commander of Fort Edward, had 5,000 soldiers under him, and he decided to send 1,500 men as reinforcements to General Monroe the next day. Early the next morning, the soldiers marched north out of the fort, traveling along the wide army road towards Fort William Henry. The same day, another smaller group of people was also getting ready to travel to Fort William Henry. There were three fine horses waiting outside General Webb's house, and a small crowd of people stood watching them. Among this crowd was a very strange person. He was tall and thin, with a large head and huge feet. He wore a sky blue coat, yellow trousers tied at the knee, white cotton stockings and shoes, an old dirty shirt, and a large black hat. While he watched, three figures left General Webb's house. Young officer was followed by two young women dressed in fine traveling clothes. The younger of the two was fair, with blue eyes. She smiled at the officer as he helped her onto her horse. The other woman, whom the officer also helped onto her horse, was beautiful too, but a little older. She wore a green scarf and had fine black hair and dark eyes. It was hard to think that the two women were sisters. One was so fair and the other was so much darker. Finally, the officer climbed onto his own horse, and the three rode off, following the Indian runner. As they left, the fair haired woman pointed at the Indian and began to talk to the officer, riding at her side. Are there many men like him in the forest here, Duncan? She asked Major Hayward. He's a little frightening. Don't worry, Alice. Maguire's just an army runner. He's promised to be our guide and to take us to the Fort William Henry by a shorter secret path through the forest. I don't like the look of him, Duncan, replied Alice. But I suppose that if you know him, he must be all right. Well, I know that he used to be on the side of the French. In fact, I believe your father punished him some years ago, although I don't remember much about it, but now he's a friend of the British, and that's good enough for me. My father's enemy in the past, said Alice. I like him even less. At that point, the Indian runner stopped and pointed to a narrow path that disappeared into the forest. Here's our path, said Major Hayward. What do you think, Cora? Asked Alice. Shall we travel on slowly but safely with the army, or go this way on our own? Alice, we won't be safer with the army, said Hayward. If we go with them, our enemies will know where to find us easily. The secret route will be much quicker and safer. Can we not trust a man with dark skin? Alice, added Cora coldly. So they left the wide road and entered the forest, following the Indian guide. They hadn't gone far before they heard something crashing through the forest behind them, getting closer. They turned and waited until at last they could see what was making all the noise. The strange man in the blue coat, yellow trousers, and white stockings appeared, riding a young horse towards them. Hayward smiled, and Alice and Cora were also amused to see him. Are you looking for someone? Asked Hayward. Yes, replied the stranger. My name is David Gemute. I'm a singing teacher. I hear you are traveling to Fort William Henry, and I'd like to come with you. The road is there, behind you, sir, replied Hayward. Oh, Duncan, please let him come with us, said Alice to Hayward, and she looked at Cora and the Indian guide, who was standing close by her. Perhaps we will need him later. Very well, replied the major, and he rode over to Cora. All four riders now turned and followed the Indian guide through the trees. David Gamute sang as they went. Not one of them realized that there were Indians hiding behind bushes in the forest, watching their every step. At a river's edge, two men were talking. One was an Indian, the other a white man whose skin was dark from the sun, and who was wearing clothes made from animal skin. Tell me about the old times. Chingachuk, Chingachuk, said the white man. Hawkeye, my friend. We're happy before the white man came here. The lake gave us fish, the sky gave us birds, and the forest gave us animals to eat. Then the Dutch came, gave our people fire water to drink. We gave our lands to them. Slowly the white men killed us one by one. Now our tribe has nearly gone. Only I and my son Uncas are left. And when I die, Uncas will be the last of the Mohicans. One of the forest, another young Indian out of the forest, another young Indian came to join them. Father, he said, I come from the forest where the Hurons are hiding. There are white men riding this way. They are your brothers, Hawkeye. You should speak to them. And Chingachuk to the white man. At that moment, Hayward rode out of the forest at the river's edge. Cora, Alice, Gemute, and the Indian guide was some 50 steps behind him. Who goes there? Called Hawkeye, picking up his rifle. Friends of the British King, replied Hayward. Are we on the right path for Fort William Henry? The right path? Laughed Hawkeye. The wrong path is what you meant. The road to William Henry is behind you. Yes, but our Indian guide was taking us on a secret path through the forest. He got lost, so I put him at the back. A lost Indian? Said Hawkeye. I can't believe that. Although it is true that you're going the wrong way, where is he from? Is a Huron from the north, but friendly to the British. Chingachuk and Uncas jumped up at these words. Never trust a Huron, said Hawkeye. I don't mind who his friends are. I'm surprised that you haven't had more trouble from him. There are more Hurons hiding in this forest, you know. But wait a moment. Chingachuk and Uncas will catch him. Then we can question him. Silently, Hawkeye's Indian friends disappeared into the bushes. A moment later, Cora, Ellis, and Gimute rode from between the trees to join the Hawkeye and Hayward. While Magua stopped at the edge of the forest, Hayward got off his horse and went over to speak to him. "Why did we come this way, Magua? We are lost. This Englishman here tells me that you're a very bad guide. Then Magua will leave you here in the forest. But what will the Scottish chief of Fort William Henry say then? He will be very angry to hear that Magua left his daughters with no guide." Suddenly there was a noise of a breaking branch, and like a frightened animal, Magua ran off into the forest. Unkaze and Chinkachu jumped from the bushes and chased him. Hawkeye lifted his rifle to his shoulder and shot after him, but Magua had already disappeared into the trees. Chapter 2. Behind the Waterfall. Seeing Hawkeye run after Magua, Hayward also began to chase him, but soon he met the White Scout, together with Chingachgook and Uncas, walking back through the forest. "Did you find him?" asked Hayward. How can a cloud catch the wind?" replied Hawkeye. "I shot him at least," he went on, pointing to the blood on the ground. "Shall we go after him?" asked Hayward. "And let him lead us to the Hurons or to the Montcalm," asked Hawkeye. "No, we should leave this place at once and let us cover our tracks so the Hurons cannot follow us. I'll pay you well to take us to Fort William Henry," said Hayward. Hawkeye and his two Indian friends talked together in low voices in Mohican. At least Hawkeye turned to Hayward. "Keep your money. The Mohicans and I will help you and the two young ladies to escape to safety. We want no money, but you must promise two things. The first is to keep as still and silent as the forest, and the second is never to tell another living person the way to our hiding place." "Agreed," said Hayward. And he went to explain the plan to Cora and Alice. "What can we do with the horse?" Hawkeye asked himself. "We can't let him go free, or the Hurons will find them. And now that we are near, 3 of the horses are old and will keep quiet if they must, so we can take them with us. But the singing teacher's horse is young and noisy. We will have to kill it and throw it into the river." He turned to Uncas. "Take that young horse," he began. "Stop!" cried Gamut. "Keep your hands off my horse." "Listen," explained Hawkeye. "All our lives are in danger. If you want your horse to live, we'll leave you here for the Hurons, or think again and let Uncas do what has to be done." Gamut fell silent, and Uncas and Chingachgook killed the young horse. He then led the other horses into the river and began to walk up it against the current. From a hiding place under some bushes, Hawkeye pulled a canoe, and Alice and Cora sat in it, with Hayward standing in the water and on one side of the boat and Hawkeye on the other. They moved after Gamut, who followed the Mohicans. After some time, they reached a lonely place where high walls of rock with trees on top stood tall and wild on either side of the running water. In front of them was another high rock wall with caves in it. Down this ran a noisy waterfall. In this narrow valley, the Mohicans left the horses tied to some bushes at the edge of the water. At the same time, Hawkeye, Hayward, and Gamut got into the canoe with Cora and Alice. The end.